welcome to what? To this stream. And today we will be looking at how we can work with application programming interfaces, fetching data from an external service, and I will go over very briefly what you've been already told in another session, but I think we can all agree that repetition is the mother of all learning, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. Perhaps you learn something new, who knows? Right, so RESTful APIs, part one. This is part two. I'm just going to go over part one real briefly, okay? Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. I never seen this one actually, but you know, rest because of the representational state transfer. Have you memorized that acronym, REST?
No.
Can you say that loud like 10 times?
No.
No? Neither can I. So REST is an architectural style. It's a way of providing interoperability between computer systems on the internet. It's a fantastic word, isn't it? Interoperability. Interoperability. Say that one 10 times. It's a proven design pattern for building loosely coupled, highly scalable applications. And then there is a lot of things attached to this, right? And there are a few moving parts here that I will show you from a practical perspective, because I do assume that it sounded mostly like Greek to you the other day when you heard this for the first time. But I would say that URLs, and you can jot this down if you want. So you know, there's this telling that President Clinton had a post-it note on his resolute desk in the Oval Office. It's about the economy, stupid. Do you remember this? I don't know if you heard about this, but everything is about the economy in politics. Well, here everything is about the resources, the URLs, and the HTTP verbs. Resources, URLs, and HTTP verbs. These are the three components that are most important here in this particular domain, how we can communicate with external services and get appropriate data. Now, this is not the first time you hear about HTTP verbs, is it?
Oh.
No, we've been hammering this in, right? And I will continue to hammer this in. Really, really important, folks. Okay? Really, really, really important. And could somebody tell me what a resource might be? No? No? No?
Like a web page?
Web page
Or
could
like-
be. Yes, a resource could be a web page. Could it be something else?
JSON file.
It cannot be a JSON file, actually. A JSON file, well, yes, wow. In a way, you could say that. Okay. A resource is like a book. It could be a person. It could be, something that is described. That's a resource, right? And a JSON object is basically what we are talking about. That's the entire scope. It's a representation of that resource's state, representational state transfer. That's what we are talking about. So we will jump into that some more. I know that Emma clarified application state versus resource state yesterday. That's important. What we are talking about is the resource state. A book, if we take a book as a resource, right? Okay, it has a title. There might be two books. They have two different titles. They might be written by the same author, but they could also be different authors. They could one book could have 200 pages, and the other one could have 2 pages, or no, perhaps not 2 because it's not a book then, but right, it's more like a leaflet. But let's say it has 20 pages, right? So it's still a resource. It's the same class, but it is a different book. Are we on board with that? Right. So we want to describe this book somehow, and in a RESTful API, that is described by a set of as an object with some properties, right? And we want to transfer that information from, for instance, a server to a client that want to use it for some reason. whatever reason that might be. It might be to show it to on the screen or process the data somehow and so on, right? But the process of storing the information about a book is done on the server, preferably in a database somewhere, and then somebody wants to take a peek at that particular book or know more about this book, and so the server pulls out information about this book and transfer it over to the client in its current state, right? We can go on forever, and we will dive deeper into this, but that's what it's all about. Whereas application state is something completely different. So what we're talking about in this context is the resource state. And we talk about the statelessness. And one thing that I just want to reiterate from Emma's talk yesterday is that the internet is built on a request response cycle, right? You request some information and the server responds with that information, right? Now, unlike many other computing models, the one that we use on the internet is totally stateless, which means that the request that I'm making at this very second needs to be understood by the server in its entirety. It needs to contain all information for the server to be able to respond. We cannot rely on the previous request or any request that will come after. It must be run totally in isolation, and that's a really, really important thing to consider. Right. It makes the web scale and so on. We can dive into this more, but the data, the information about each resource that we will be looking at today is transferred either in XML or in JSON. Not so much XML nowadays, at least not in our context, the way we do it, but the JSON format is really important. Anyone can tell me what JSON stands for? It's an acronym. Very quickly.
JavaScript object notation.
Yes, sir, that's right. JavaScript object notation. So it's a way to describe objects in JavaScript. But JSON can be understood by many programming languages. There are parsers for everything. Right. Was that a alarm? No. Okay.
Yeah, it's your life on Twitch. Sorry.
Right. So resource identification is really, really important. We will take a look at this from a practical perspective in just a second. But each request should identify, should be able to identify a single resource. So if we want to modify a resource, then we should be able to do that. We probably, there is something like bulk update, but generally speaking, you can say that you should always strive for one request update, one single resource in your database. And if you want to fetch some information, you should be able to get a resource back or none at all. But that should not render an error, but rather an empty response, an empty object. That is also important. But here comes the thing that is important, so that we can just iterate over this. I said that the URI, the resource, and the HTTP verb makes out the three components that are really, really important in REST. And we know those HTTP verbs that are most often used. That is the get, post, put, and delete request. Get, post, put, delete. There are 4 of them, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem for you guys to remember. And they correspond with the 4 things you can do to an object that we often refer to as CRUD. Anybody know or can tell me what CRUD stands for?
Create, read, update, delete.
Yes, sir. That's Emma. That will make Emma happy, because that means that you remember what she said yesterday.
I said it to myself like 20 times after she...
That's the spirit. Repetition is the mother of all learning. CRUD, it stands for create, read, update, delete. And is there anything else you can do to an object other than those 4 things in life? Don't worry about coding. Let's say we take this cup for an instance. What can you do to this cup other than those 4 things?
Can drink from it.
Yes. Well, what happens when you drink from it?
You delete the coffee inside it.
You change the state of this cup. Yes, exactly. The cup can be filled with coffee. That's a state in a way, right? And when I drink from it, I update it, right? I update the cup. So that's the update thing. Anything else? I can grow tired of this fucking thing, right? And I can throw it away. What action
But
would
that would
that
be
be?
delete.
That's the delete action, exactly. I can
And
I can
you could make a new one then. Once
well,
you've thrown that one away.
that would be the create action,
Create.
right? Uh, and I can look at it. I can look at it and I can admire it. What a fantastic V for Vendetta cup I have, right? That would be the read action, and there actually isn't anything else you can do to it, right? All things you can do to an object in life can fall under those four categories: create, read, update, delete. That's the life cycle of any object, I would argue. Uh, okay, so let's just go over this because you can in computer systems you can modify the behavior using parameters that you send into your server. Let's say we want to drink from this cup, so we would say we would invoke the cup and then send off the action that I want to perform. For instance, by saying drink true and loop over it until it's empty, while loop, for instance, or what have you, right? But you went over this at some other time. Right, now this word. Luke, you the native English speaker, how do you pronounce this properly?
Emma said, like, you said it very well. It's the idempotence.
Idempotence.
No, it's the ida.
Yeah, all right. We've had a discussion about this, and I am always like not really sure what it's how to pronounce it. But this idea is really really important. It's the property of a certain operation in math or computer science that means that they can be applied multiple times without changing the result beyond the initial application. I know I've spoken to you about this before, but like the delete action is an idempotent action that you perform. Every time you delete, it is deleted. You can't more than get rid of it, right? A create action is not an idempotent action because every time you create an object, every time you invoke the create action, a new object will be created. The update action, given you send in the same parameters, it's an idempotent action because it will, it doesn't really matter how many times you do it, it will always yield the same result. If I change my name to Thomas once, then my new name is Thomas. If I change my name to Thomas again, my name is still Thomas, right? So it's the same. It's an idempotent action. A post, so that's great, and a get action. The read is also an idempotent. It doesn't matter how many times I look at this cup, it will still look like this cup, right? So it's I don't yield a different result, independent of how many times I do it. Right. And then we have the safe methods, and that is another thing. And this is an exercise that we will play today, the safe and idempotent methods, because safe methods are those methods who do not modify the resource. And again, idempotent methods are methods that can be called many times. Right. So let's forget about this fantastic thing that Emma told you everything about yesterday and that I just recapped, and let's move into some coding. My man cold is killing me. Right. Okay. So there is an API that you've already looked at, the RecRes API. I think you used that one in your employee list thing. So in terms of restfulness, if we take a look at that from that perspective, is this a RESTful API? I would say it is a RESTful API. And how do I know that? Because by looking at the at the URL, by looking at the URL, I can identify what sort of data I will get from that API. I'm making that statement. I'm dropping the ball. Does anybody want to pick it up? Can you do that? Can you identify what sort of data you will get just by looking at the URL? Now, of course, you
With
can't.
users,
Once again,
well, like we'll get some users on some page.
some users at some page. Yes, that's exactly right. You will get some users at some page. Let me just pull that up so you can see this better, because apparently I forgot to. Let's see. CD this and then. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry about that. Right. So let's get this terminal up here. Okay. So I'm going to say I'm just going to create rest demo, and I'm going to do just cd into rest demo, and I'm going to open this up in code, and we will create a new file, and I'm just going to call it notes.md, and I just do this and this and this and open preview. Right, so this is the URL, https://recres.in/API users. What sort of data can we get when we hit that endpoint?
List of objects.
Data of users.
Users, exactly. If this would be cups, right? What would be the topic?
Cups, I imagine.
Probably. And if this would say cars, then we would probably get
Some cars.
yes. And if we would get this, for instance,
Car number 2.
yes, exactly. My point exactly. So this is a good thing, people. And try to remember this really, because this is when it's important. By looking at the URL, I can get information on what sort of data I will receive. If I hit this URL, I will probably not get a list of users. I will get a list, not even a list of cars, but I will get a specific car, right?
Thomas, quickly, the 2 that you put there, would that call ID2 or position2?
ID2, probably. It depends, of course, who built the API. But if I look at this, let's say I haven't built this API, and I look at this URL, I can foresee, or be pretty sure that I will get a car with probably an internal ID of 2. Do you understand? Like I could also get something like this, GLK026, right? If I see this and I live in Sweden, I could probably assume that this is a registration number of the car that I will get information about, right? I'm not saying that this is a real API. I'm just saying that in this context, when you look at the URLs, you can be pretty sure about what sort of info you will get. And in this case of the reqres thing, we can say that it says users, and if we want to look at a specific user, if we get a single user, you can see that it follows that specific logic. User/2 will render a specific user. You can see here the data here contains an object, and that object has an ID of 2, right? Okay. That's pretty neat, isn't it? That's pretty neat. You can actually see just by the URL what you will get. That's a RESTful API. You can identify the resource by the URL. But there's more to it, right? We can see here that we're making a GET request to get that single user. Do you see that? Okay, so then the HTTP verb comes into play. So we have the URL and the resource and the HTTP verb to account for it. Now, if we would say, look at this this URL, it is /API/user/2, right? Let's say that we do a put request or a patch request, and we take a look at the URL. It is still the same URL. Do you see that? But what happens is that the HTTP verb changes and we get a different behavior. So, sanity check, what does a put request do? Of the 4 things that we can do to an object?
Updates it.
It updates it.
Yeah.
So apparently the put request will fetch the second user, which was, I think in this case it was Janet, right? It will take that specific user, get it from the database, and then if we send off some parameters with that request, it will change Janet to Morpheus, apparently in this example. Okay? Okay, so we have the same URL, but we have 2 different HTTP verbs and we have 2 different set of behaviors. Are we clear on that?
Yes.
And what would happen if we use the same URL, but we would send off a delete the request?
Bye Janet.
Bye Janet or Morpheus. It depends on when,
Yeah.
of course, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Same URL, different HTTP verb. This is really, really important. Okay. So let's take a look at another API. So there is one that is called Swappy. Is it .com? Let's try that. No, that wasn't. Star Wars API. It was swappy.dev. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm a Trekkie, so I usually don't do Star Wars, but there is no good Star Trek API. Now, if we look at Swappy, what sort of, now you know this because you can see the response, but what do you think we get out of this URL that I just highlighted?
Some person.
Yep.
Like,
with an ID of 1 probably in the database, and in this case it's Luke Skywalker for some reason. Okay, so we know that people in this particular API are the characters of Star Wars. Okay, so shall we try for instance 2 instead of 1? That would be
Leia.
You think so? Why is this not working?
After 2 also you need to put slash.
Usually I don't, but let's try that. Oh, it was that. But I shouldn't probably.
C3PO.
I should probably.
That's strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's C3PO. Let's see if we can do 5 instead. That's Leia. Oh, there you go. She came 5th. That's weird. Right, and then we can do planets.
Coruscant.
Dagobah, that's the
Dagobah.
5th one. But I think Tatooine is the first one. Yes. Right. Okay, so we know that. We have starships.
It has to be the Millennium Falcon first.
Oh, because I star. What? What am I doing now? Did I misspell starships? No. Oh, there are no IDs on them.
Wow.
That's weird.
It says Starships 9 as an example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Why would they do that? Okay, that's the Death Star. Well, anyway, perhaps I did something wrong. I'm gonna try one just to see if that's actually. That was a 404. That's weird. So there is no first Starship. Let's say 10. Do we have anything on 10? Yeah, the Millennium Falcon is on 10. Okay, so but again, this is restful because we can see that by looking at the URL, we can foresee, we can know what sort of a resource data we will receive. That's neat. That's really, really good. There's many things that you could say are bad about the RESTful architecture, but this is the essence of the good stuff, right? There are many good things with it. Shall we take a look at an API that is also a RESTful one? So your beloved GitHub has also an API, an external API that we can look at. And so if we go to users, we can do get/user, and we can get data about that, right? So if we just hit this in our browser, it's a GET request, so I can do that request in our browser. We cannot do POST requests or PUT requests in the browser, but we can do this now. This one says it requires authentication to do that, because I'm probably trying to pull out data about myself. But if I just pass in Tochman, which is my username on GitHub, it's not found. Okay, why not? We're gonna have to read the documentation. Stats login AutoCAD ID. Oh, is it called login? Let's see. Get a user. Oh, it's not user but users. Sorry, my fault. I went too fast. User Stockman, right. So this is the representation of my GitHub account in JSON format. And you can try this yourself, feel free. Go to your browser and say api.github.com/users/your own username, or if you are into me, do Tochman, that's perfectly fine, and you should get a good result of your account. So that's pretty restful, because you can take a look at this thing and you can see what happens. And we're all about consuming APIs at the moment, right? So we will mainly look at the GET requests because the updating of data or creating data will come in later when we move on into more advanced topics with APIs. But this is pretty cool. You can get an object in JSON format that represents your entire account, right? And if you want to dive deeper into this particular account, we can get my avatar. Like, let's say that we will build a client to use this GitHub API. We can just grab the content of this thing and we can see my avatar. And you can probably get your own avatars as well if you have set any. If I would like to see what sort of organizations I belong to, I can grab this organization's URL, which is another call to the API, and execute that, and I can see that I am part of Agile Ventures, I'm part of Craft Academy, I'm part of Craft Academy Labs, and this is Code Community, and that's about it, right? So you can probably get that too if you are part of any organization on GitHub. And all of this is in this very structured way, right? You can see that this particular URL looks like this. right. So we see HTTPS API github.com, which is the domain, the server, and then we say users, then Tochman, which is the unique identifier. Remember yesterday you guys spoke about this fact that you should identify your user with something that is unique, whether it's, one thing that we all know is unique is the primary key in the database, right? That is that is always unique. But on GitHub, they have another business rule that there can only be one user with a specific username. You cannot have two Tochmans, for instance, right? So, so that's why we can use this this username as part of the URL, because it's a unique identifier. But then we have another slash, and then we have orgs. Okay, so what happens on the server side? I don't know what happens, but I can just assume because I know how to write a little bit of code. So when the controller or that particular part of the application that is responsible with creating this object, there is a piece of software somewhere that creates this object and sends it off to me, right? That particular piece of code is looking into this URL, grabbing that name Tochman, right? Querying the database. Does a user like Tochman actually exist? Yes, he does exist in our database. Okay, what else do they want to know? Well, there seems to be something else in the next parameter, and that is orgs, which tells this piece of software that they are not interested in Tochman per se. They are interested, whoever is querying me at the moment is interested in getting the organizations that this guy belongs to. So it queries, get me all organizations where a user or a member equals Tochman or includes Tochman. Okay, and then it creates a JSON object and sends it off to the client side. Okay, so if you think about the things that we told you guys about, that parameters, query parameters or body parameters can get you a long way, this is exactly a good example of that. You are modifying the behavior of the server by sending in parameters to the inside of your URL. And if we would go into let's say my followers, you see, the URL would be very similar, but now we see, the domain, users, Tochman, and then we say slash, and not orgs but followers, and that will tell our controller that, hey, he's not interested in followers, he's not interested in organizations, he's interested in followers. Okay, and this takes me back to what I said before, that the server needs to know everything we need from the request. Do you understand? It doesn't matter what I queried for just a second ago or 2 minutes ago, or what I will eventually query for again. It needs to have all the information necessary for that request to happen, which would be a very annoying thing in real life. Okay, so let me like, if you talk to a normal person, if I would talk to Emma, for instance, right, I would say, hey Emma, is there a user on GitHub called Tochman? And she would say, yeah, there is. Then I could say, then show me his organizations, right, or tell me what organizations he belongs to, and then he is automatically interpreted by Emma as Tochman, right? If I have this line of conversation with her, then she would know that, okay, he is asking me if Tochman exists, and now he wants to know his organizations, or now he wants to know his followers. Now a computer system, definitely a distributed computer system like the one running on the internet and the GitHub API, does not remember who he is. So it's not enough if we say, does Thomas exist, and then in a consequent request say, okay, then show me his followers or show me his organizations. I have to provide the entire context within that same request. Does that make sense, people?
Yeah, but I wanted to ask. So, for example, that thing wouldn't work if, like, for example, information requires some authentication. Like, you can say that, or it's every single time you will pass in like your like login and password when you want
That's a
to.
very good question, because that's the answer is it depends, unfortunately. But in principle, I can tell you this. Uh, when you identify, let's say that I would identify with this API, which is something we can do. We don't have to do it to get some information, but to get some deeper info, I would need to authenticate. Now I would provide my username password one way or another, and then I would probably get a token from this API
Mhm.
in the form of headers. And the interesting part is that the second, sorry, the very second uh, the very second we are receiving that token, or the very second the server issues that token and sends it off to us, he forgets about us. Do you understand? He saves the token somewhere in the database, uh, and then moves on to other business, right?
And so
And
he basically then just compare if it exists in the
exactly.
database and
Exactly. So the
therefore.
next time you query, you have to send that token with the request anyway. Do you
Okay.
understand, right? And we just
Okay.
got a question here. What if it is a variable var his name passes? Yeah, but that's a programmatic thing. That happens on your client side, right? You can store the information somewhere, and you can make consequent calls based on that info that you have stored in your own local memory, or even your local database or local storage or whatever. But the network would require you to pass in all the necessary information for the server to understand who you are. So basically what we do with authentication is that we are faking it. Do you understand? We are re-authenticating at all requests every time. And actually, without jumping too far ahead, with many systems, you are authenticating and you receive a new token on every request, right? Just to prevent malicious use, because somebody could, in principle, intercept your request and then use that token multiple times for his or her own purposes, right? But that's a different discussion, one would say. Uh, but I just wanted to touch upon this, that it doesn't matter if you've just asked a second ago, or if you ask 10 minutes from now, for the next for the next piece of information based on the information that you've already had. You still need to provide the entire context to the server. And glad that Jay understood that as well. All right. So if we look at those three things, uh, we have three different APIs, three different set of documentation, and it requires you to be able to read documentation and look for specific things when you approach them, if you want to use them. And what you want to see is, again, what HTTP verb should I use with my request? What is the URL, and what sort of data will I get? Do you understand? So in your browsers, like, let's see if I can just pull this up. I can open up my dev tools, make this a little bigger. I can go to the network tab, and I can reload this baby. And apparently I don't get that. I'm sorry. But let's see. Yeah, I can do this instead, so you guys can see this. If I would say I think I can do this. Let orgs equal fetch, and then the URL, like this. Can I do that? I think I can do that. Oh no, because it's a course issue. God damn it! Can't do that here. Because we don't have a server started, so there's a security problem here. So we're gonna have to do this Slightly different. We're gonna have to create a new file, and we're gonna call this index HTML, and I need to just go to this one and say yarn init dash yes and yarn add super static. Super static is a small web server. I can add it as a dev dependency, and then we can just say add a scripts, and I will add one that is called start, and that would be super static index. I think it's enough if I do that. Not sure. HTML5, and then just h1 hello, or no, yeah, API demo. Right, let's see if we can get this up and running. So we should be able to say yarn start, I guess. Right, 3474 command click. Right, cannot get this, why not? Super static. I should be able just to do that then. I need to stop this, run yarn start again. Right, there we go, API demo. Okay, there we go. That was the fastest configuration I ever done, I think. Only one fuck up. It's not bad. That's not bad. Anyway, let's see if we can now do something like script and document get add event listener, and then DOM content loaded, and then a callback here. And now we will just do let orgs equal fetch, and then that orgs, and then we just say a debugger here. I think we should be able to do that. So let's open this one up, go to our console, stop this, reload, and now we can take a look at the network tab in our DevTools. And this one is interesting now, right? Because we can see here that we made a call somewhere. Yes, we made a call to this API here that is being described. Refer policy strict, which is a content length, and we get, it's a GET request to that path, and the schema is HTTPS and all of that things. You can read out a lot of information from this one. And if we get here in the response, we can see the actual response we got from that server. You understand? And the preview. So this is a response already passed into JSON, but this one is we can already see them as objects. Do you understand? So that's pretty nice. And if we just reload this again and hit that debugger in our console, we can say orgs, right? And that is a promise. Do you understand? But the promise means that we have made a request, but it hasn't still been executed for us properly, right? So we would have to modify our script a little bit if we want to use this for anything. So I will make this an asynchronous async function, and I will say await, and then I would say so I will rename this to response, and I will say let orgs equal await response JSON, like this. And now we should be able to get that. Let's see. So orgs is now an array with this stuff, right? So the rest is just cosmetics, right? Now the rest is pretty simple. We just say orgs for each oh shoot, there we go. And then we say organization, and then we say document body append. Okay, I need to create a child. Let's just say org node, and I would just create that. Let org node equals document create element. Let's create a div, and then we say org node in a HTML equals, and then I just create a string interpolator h1 and in here I will just interpolate organization, and then you go like, what is the name of the attribute? That's pretty easy. You just check this. It's called login actually. So we just say .login, and we should be good on this one. Right. Now you display all of this stuff in without a problem, right? So I'm not going to show you everything that you can do with this particular API, but there is no problem, nothing that that would stop us from modifying this code to use this swappy thing. So we say people. If we just take a look at the people, no, right. And that the array comes in results, and it's called name, right? So we can just do instead of this address, I can just use this and say people, and that would be, we can keep orgs, which is misleading, and then we will say name response results for each, or I think this should work. Who knows? Right. So the method of displaying this is the same, but you just modify your code a little bit. You fetch the data from a different API and display this this info on screen. So again, the good thing here is, of course, that you should probably change this to people and this one to person, and this org node to person node, right? Because it follows a better structure that is, you know, tightly coupled to the resource that you are actually working with at this very point, the very moment. And you should get some error. Org node is not defined. Why? Oh, there it is. Right. Person node. I forgot to change that. There we go. Right. So different APIs, different sets of data. You can always read it by using various methods of fetching that data. And the fetch method that I'm using here Might look a little weird to you with these 2 lines of code. So the first thing I need to do is to query for this. Fetch is promised based, so it resolves after when it actually gets the response back. So you can use this asynchronous method for this. But then you have to transfer it into JSON, and that is the second line. That is also a promise-based thing. So hence the double await, which could be a bit weird actually for people. I think I could in principle change this to this await. No. Dot JSON. Is that how we do that? JSON await. Right, and then it's been a while. Right. So I can change this into a one-liner if I want, but then I do a double await directly here. Do you understand? So it's not very readable. The reason why I was a bit hesitant because I rarely use the fetch API, this method, because when you work with React, you tend to use Axios instead. It's a bit smoother, a bit better, or different, better perhaps. Right. Right. So this is it, folks. RESTful APIs. Now you've seen the rec-res, which you used for the employee list demo or workshop that we did. I showed you briefly the Star Wars API, which is fairly RESTful, and then I showed you a glimpse of the GitHub API, where you can fetch a user based on his name and so on, right? And then go pick it up from there. Now another thing that I want to show you is the other side of the story before we call it a day. We have a few more minutes, and that would be a not so RESTful API. Okay, and Emma, do you remember we did this drinks the drinks API?
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I think it's just
The cocktail
yeah,
DB, right?
The
That's
cocktail DB.
right. So this is an example. It's a great API. It's really fun. I've had some students and the participants building applications with this, because here you can for instance get a list of drinks based on a specific ingredient, right? So you can still see similarities to what we've talked about. You still have the URL, right? And you have the domain or the server address, and then you have this path API JSON. Then they actually version their API for various reasons. We will talk about that at some other point. Version 1, and then it's like a /1 that I don't really understand what it comes from. It feels a little bit like a magic number, to be honest. I do not know what the 1 stands for. And then you have a weird thing, in my opinion, that you have a search.php. First of all, I feel sorry for them to having to work with PHP altogether, but that's my personal opinion. But then you are sending in a parameter with, because you have this question mark, and you send the I, which probably stands for ingredient, equals vodka, right? And that, let's see what that gives us. That gives us right. That gives us a lot of vodkas. Let's see if we can. I don't know. Did I ever install Postman? Let's see if we have Postman applications. No Postman? No? No Postman. Okay. Well, that's weird. New computer. Right, but you do get a JSON object, and that includes a lot of drinks and so on. It's not really my point here. What you get, you can always argue that it's still a good API, but by looking at this API, I can't immediately identify the resource that I will be getting back, right? And here you could say, but it says vodka here, Thomas. Okay, fair enough. I can buy into that. But if you look at this one, look up full cocktail details by ID. That, if you just look at that particular URL without the description, just the URL, you can't really see what you will be getting back. Do you understand? So in my opinion, that is not very restful, right? What I would, if I know the ID of the cocktail, what I would probably do is to have something like, this is what they have, and I would probably use something like this. This would be the difference between theirs and my no, sorry, not at all this. I would say how do you spell cocktail, by the way? C-O
K.
with a
C-O-C-K.
It is, but
Tail.
that sounds like a cock, but anyway.
It's a cocktail.
Yeah, it's a cocktail.
Yeah, it's basically cocktail.
Yeah, a tail of all right. So that's how I would probably structure this. Do you understand? Because this URL, in my opinion, tells you what resource you will be getting. This one is more cryptic. I would definitely get rid of this /1. Again, I don't know what that stands for at all. If I would be building that API, that's what this URL would look like. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You see the difference?
Yeah.
Right. So when you look for APIs, and I think in the mid-course project or later further down the line, we will try to build something based on an external API. You want to look for something that is fairly restful. And what I just told you, there's so much more to this, of course. I'm not claiming that we are touching upon all aspects of this RESTful architecture, but I would definitely take a glimpse at the URL and look at it. And if you can't identify the data you will be getting back, then you probably then the API is not very restful. Okay, I think that does it for me. Did I miss anything, Emma? Should I bring up anything else?
I think you covered it.
Lucas, your thoughts?
No, same comments as yesterday. I guess kind of, it might seem like a lot. I don't know. I don't even know if it seems a lot to you guys, but it's all about playing around with it. And for example, if you guys are finished with the challenge already, try to do the same thing but with another API, or try to do it without looking at the documentation or something. Just keep playing around with it until you know it by heart, basically. That would be my comment.
At least the concepts, you don't have to remember how to code it up or how to write it up, but okay, I need to hit this, I will get this, I need to transform this to JSON, is it a singleton or is it a collection? Should I iterate over this or should I just show everything automatically, right? In this case, both of these code examples that I showed you, I knew beforehand that this would be a collection rather than just one single object. So because I can look at the URL and it doesn't, I can tell by looking at the URL that it will return a collection, and my assumptions was right, and therefore I'm iterating over this and so on. And again, never underestimate the need to look into your network tab. You will see this call being made, and you can always preview the response. And by doing that, you don't even have to console log this. You can always look at, so it comes with some count and the next and the previous. But no, but the data that I'm looking for is in this results wrapper, right? Which in a way is not very restful in itself, to be honest. But that's another. This should actually be. It shouldn't be called results. It should be called people. If you would follow the RESTful specifications strictly, but that's another story. There's much more to all of this. Luke, did you learn anything today?
Yeah, that I can read a URL and actually see what's on the page more than what's just google.com or whatever. So that was quite cool. And yeah, that's sort of just to trying to play around with them. I think I'll definitely do that for sure in some sort of way. Try and maybe incorporate in the portfolio in some way, something to always sort of fall back on and see what happens.
Awesome. Good stuff. Kim?
Yeah, I think I learned something. I hope so. I hope no, but yeah, most of this, like reading the URL, is not that hard when it's RESTful, at least. So yeah,
Cool.
it's good.
Awesome. Arun?
Yep, it's very interesting. How can you fetch data from APIs, and it's like specific data or like list and everything. It's like you just need to, it's like how to use URLs to fetch data. This is very interesting from APIs. So that was that. This is what I learned today. How to
Good
fetch
stuff.
data.
Awesome. Awesome. Christer, your thoughts?
Yeah, it was nice to see the difference between a RESTful one and not, and how you could like play around with it. So I have never like read a URL before I started this course, but now I understand it a little better.
That's the
So,
spirit.
Yeah,
That's the spirit.
it's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of info to be fetched, to be gathered from various sources, and the URL is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Seva, your thoughts?
Yeah, like some stuff that you were saying like before is kind of all come together like the previous lecture. It's a bit more understandable now, like when you hear it second time and you see some examples. So yeah, it's just kind of coming together.
Right.
What API is, how to work with it and stuff.
Cool. And David, finally.
Yes. Yeah, it's coming together, as I said. It's I have a small question, maybe stupid, but can we use APIs like Luke was telling me about Twitch, like make it when you're live, So can you put the API link inside our projects to have this specific link to connect together with
Right. So I think Luke might be the better suited to answer this question. I can tell you this, that you usually don't use them as links, but rather as programmatically fetching that. But in order to be notified by the Twitch API, it would require the Twitch API to actually send out a WebSocket notification. Otherwise, you have to poll it over and over again. Just query: Are you live? Are you live? Are you live? If you want to turn the you see, so probably the Twitch API would give you some sort of status if you ask for it. Oh, is Luke live? Yes, he is live. Or is Luke live now? No, he actually ended his stream. But that would require your application to constantly ask for it. But there is one way. We will cover this at some point. That where you actually flip the situation, and you have a backend service to send out notifications. You get them all the time on your phones. They are called push notifications, and many of them. There are different ways to create them, but the most common one is called WebSockets. But that's a little bit over your. It's definitely not the scope of this of today's talk. Let's put it this way. Let's put it this way. Now I will get you a link to this documentation. As often, the Microsoft Developer Network is a good source for getting more information about Fetch. I just want to tell you that I use the simplest form of this API, where we just inputted the URL, I didn't use then. I used the asynchronous way of doing this, but I just want you to understand that there is many other things you can do with this. So by default, you are making a get request with fetch, but you can make post request, put, delete, and so on. You can tweak this with more options and so on. Even if you don't believe me, I'm trying to pick the low-hanging fruit, trying to do the basic implementation first before you guys dive into more advanced concepts. So what I showed you now is the easy part. There are many other parts to this, and it's your responsibility, of course, because you are dedicated to this, and it lies in your own interest to dive deeper into this and experiment with this setting. That does it for us today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. I see you in my next talk and workshop. Thanks.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And for the viewers on stream, thank you very much for tuning in. I will be back at some other point doing more interesting coding exercises. Stay cool, stay safe, and stay healthy. Wash your hands.